Australian news organisation 6 News,
the only news and current affairs channel which presents the perspectives of people their own age.
In my view, they're the best media outlet in our nation.
The Prime Minister gets up and says this, and I'm thinking, does this come from Channel 6 News?
Adam Bandt, welcome back to 6 News.
Thanks for having me.
Bob Carter, welcome to 6 News.
God bless all the listeners.
David Christopherly, thank you so much for joining us here on 6 News once again.
My pleasure, Austin. Thanks for having me back.
Senator Fatima Payman joins 6 News now. Anthony Albanese, welcome to 6 News.
Live and exclusive on 6 News, this is the Queensland Senate debate. Now, here's Leonardo Puglisi.
Good evening, it's just gone 7 p.m. in Queensland, 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, and welcoming a historic first for 6 News, a live Senate debate between 4 key candidates vying for your vote at the upcoming federal election. Tonight you're going to hear from 4 key players, including 2 incumbent senators, about their policies, their views on the big issues, and of course we'll be asking plenty of your questions as well. We're going to touch on the big issues. Now you're welcome to use the live chat to have your say, give us your thoughts, and of course live tweet it using the hashtag 6NewsAU. The rules for tonight are pretty simple, and we're not too strict on this, but we will have an opening and a closing statement for each candidate so they get the chance to introduce themselves, but also have a nice and final say in each debate. Each question and each answer, rather, will go for about a minute max. We're not particularly strict on the timing, but just to make sure that everyone's up to date and we're not going too late, we will just keep it to about a minute max. And of course, at the end, we're going to do a segment where each candidate gets the chance to ask one other candidate a question of their own choosing. So they might pass on that, they might not, and we don't know those questions, so it'll be a nice surprise for all of us. Joining us tonight are, as I mentioned, 2 incumbents, but 4 key candidates at this election. Belinda Jones from the Legalise Cannabis Party, Senator Malcolm Roberts from One Nation, Senator Gerard Rennick from People First, and the Libertarian Party's Jim Willmott. We thank them all for joining us here tonight, especially in light of ex-tropical cyclone Alfred. It's made things behind the scenes a bit more interesting, but we've got it up and running, and we're really, really glad they're able to do this tonight. We will now begin with opening statements, and by alphabetical order by surname. Belinda Jones, we'll let you begin with your opening statement. You've got a minute max. You've got the floor.
For Legalise Cannabis Party. I'm a mother of 3, a grandmother of 4, and I'm an investigative journalist for Independent Australia. Formerly, I was a primary school teacher. I have a Bachelor of Education from Griffith University. I've worked as a single mum, often 2 jobs in hospitality, retail, administration, transport and FIFO work, and I live on the Gold Coast. I've lived here for over 30 years.
Thank you very much. Next up, Senator Rennick, your opening statement.
Hi guys, Senator Gerard Rennick. I've been a senator for Queensland for the last almost 6 years. It's been a great honour. I've always put the people first. I've always stood up against the tyranny of the institutions, including big government, big media, big corporations, big unions and big super funds. We have a range of policies, people first, that are designed to put the people first and to serve the best interests of the people, and that's across a wide range of areas, including economic, health, defence, etc. And of course, I also believe that if you elect me, I can help bring the minor parties together over the next 6 years.
Thank you very much. Senator Roberts, your opening statement.
Thank you, Leo. In my term in the Senate, I've always been free to speak the truth and to advance policies that meet the needs of the Australian people. After 6 years of listening tours throughout Queensland and Australia, and with the help of power, experience and resources, One Nation has developed a set of policies that will get young people into their own home, that will reduce the cost of groceries, petrol, insurance, housing and travel, and that will restore abundance and opportunity to all Australians. Tonight, I look forward to sharing One Nation's election platform.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, Jim Willmott, we'll let you go ahead with your opening statement.
Thanks, Leo. Now, Australians are being crushed by a cost of living crisis, but the real issue is it's from a cost of government crisis. More taxes, more red tape, and more control. Canberra keeps taking, and you keep paying the price. We Libertarians are here to end the woke regime that has infiltrated every level of government. We believe in restoring power to where it belongs, back to individuals, families, and grassroots communities. We don't need any more identity politics dividing us. We must stand as one people under one flag and focus on real solutions. Cheaper energy, a stronger economy, and more freedom. It's time to get government out of the way and put power back where it belongs, with you.
Thank you very much, and we'll begin with our questions now. You mentioned a good segue at the start of that, so we'll get on to it. Senator Roberts, I'll ask you this first. Australians do agree that the high cost of living is one of their top issues at this election. We've seen that across all age groups, all demographics, all political party supporters. In your view, what has caused this, and what do you propose we do about it?
Massive government has caused it, Leo. It's a very good question. Massive government with policies that are basically not based on data, that are just emotional headline grabbing statements that are just undermining the Australian people. And always it's the Australian people that pay for it. One Nation's policies will put more money in people's pockets. Families with a dependent child at home will benefit $9,500 to $10,000 each. Individuals around $2,000 each. That will come from income splitting for families with dependents at home, dependent children at home, through a joint tax return filing. That will save about $9,500 per year, put more money in families' pockets. We'll halve the fuel excise tax, so that'll save 26 cents per litre on diesel and petrol. We'll cut out the alcohol excise tax in hospitality venues to revive industry, the hospitality industry, and revive social communal get-togethers. We will cut electricity bills 20% immediately, reductions of up to 50% longer term. These are some of the issues that people face, and we want to put more money back in people's pockets by addressing the key thing, which is cutting out government waste and duplication.
Senator Rennick, I'm interested in your thoughts as well. You and Senator Roberts have served together, including the beginning and what is the end stages of the COVID pandemic changing things. What do you believe has caused this current crisis we face ourselves in?
Yeah, thanks, Leo. Look, this current crisis has been an accumulation of 40 years of mismanagement by the government. And yes, it's true, there has been way too much government spending and government has interfered in our personal lives. But government has also walked away from the responsibilities of actually building infrastructure, because much of our inflation has been caused not just by too much demand, but by not enough supply. And when we privatised all our infrastructure back in the late 80s, early 90s, we let all our manufacturing go offshore. We started sending our children to universities. We then had to start spending money on parents paying for childcare. All of these things have accumulated in basically too much inflation. And what we really need to do is go and unravel those policies that were introduced in the mid-80s. Many of your listeners probably are too young to know what those policies were. They were the Button Plan, the Dawkins Plan, superannuation. Because what that has been doing is taking money out of your pocket and giving it to the rent seekers, and not actually what the government should be doing, and especially at the state government level, is building more power stations, building more ports, rail, etc. And if we have a solution here at People First to actually have an infrastructure bank and a people's retail bank to make sure that we no longer pay foreign banks for the cost of interest, which is killing us, to reskill our children in skills that will actually deliver genuine productivity gains, and to actually put more money back in people's pockets by voluntary superannuation, childcare back to the parents, and extensive income tax cuts.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the bank policy, and we'll get to that a little later. And you also mentioned housing, and we'll definitely get to that a little later. Something that is related to the cost of living crisis, and we've heard about the energy crisis, and Belinda Jones, I'll direct this one to you. This question's coming from the Brisbane Political Comments Group. They have asked, Australia is in an energy crisis. What is your plan for Queenslanders to fix this issue? So, Ms Jones, what would you do about energy in this country?
Thank you for the question. We support all forms of energy that will work to solve our energy crisis. We do support renewables, And when it comes to nuclear energy, for us, the jury is really still out. We're waiting on the coalition to provide a business case, what budget measures they will take over the forward estimates, and a bit more information, including timelines and key performance indicators, to give us some idea of where we should form our policy position around nuclear. And I think a lot of Australians are waiting for that detail too. So when it comes to the energy crisis and a lot of the other crises we're facing, it is a culmination of failures of major parties who seem to be very out of touch with what real Australians are going through. And we offer a plan through legalising cannabis and embracing the full potential of the hemp industry, which will provide government with multiple sources of revenue through that, and we can identify key areas that can ease cost of living crisis and even build up a lot of rural and regional industries. Hemp is a game changer for rural and regional Australia. And if we can earmark some of that revenue to help young people get into apprenticeships and trades, but not only support the apprentice, we need to focus on supporting the businesses, because when those apprentices graduate, they leave the business. So we want to embrace the hemp industry and realise its potential, but use that money wisely to benefit Australians through education.
We will certainly get to the issue of legalising cannabis a little later in this. I'm interested, though, Jim Willmott, there's been a lot of talk, not necessarily just in this debate, about what the government can do for it. I know your party takes a bit of a different approach in terms of what government can and can't and should or shouldn't be doing. Is there a government way to solve the cost of living crisis and the energy crisis, in your view?
Well, I think there's three big wrecking balls in our economy, and various candidates here have mentioned different components. One is the out-of-control government spending. I think Labor in this term has spent something like $346 billion, and of course that's contributed to inflation. And they really haven't spent that money on, like Senator Rennick was saying, on infrastructure and stuff that provides benefits to Australia. They've used it for their own political means. The second wrecking ball is our energy crisis. Yes, we are in a real energy crisis. We used to be, we've gone from energy prosperity and we're heading over an energy cliff to energy poverty. So, and the last wrecking ball is red and green tape. We are the world champions in developing a bureaucracy that reduces productivity and restricts growth. On energy, I'd like to say, and we need to really react quickly to this, because we're not far away from having blackouts. We've seen them now. So, I support a common sense approach to energy crisis, but not one that's going to take us there in 10 years. And I include nuclear power as a priority, but we need, as a priority, to keep coal-fired power stations and build more gas peakers to ensure that we've got the reliability and the base load while reducing cost to industry and the public, because that's one of the main drivers for the cost of living is power, because it affects everything. It is our nervous system. So we must ditch these arbitrary self-imposed deadlines and unrealistic targets that are just steamrolling our communities, destroying the environment and smothering farmlands in this renewable. So I propose an immediate moratorium on commercial renewable projects and to remove all subsidies while lifting the bans on nuclear power. Every Australian deserves access to reliable and affordable energy. That's our top priority, not chasing these net zero fantasies that leave our environment and rural communities and the economy in tatters. So I'll always put the energy security and affordability of power first for the Australian people.
Ms. Jones, do you reckon that coal could be an answer here? There is talk about Australia's coal capacity, which does exist at the moment. Is that helpful at the moment?
Coal is obviously an option that has to remain part of our energy mix for several years to come. But unless we start to move away from coal, we face being ostracised on the world stage, where they impose restrictions on countries who aren't pulling their weight in terms of climate change. So not only is it about the emissions of coal, but it also is, being on that world stage and being on the same page as all the other nations who are trying to address climate change in a real way. And we have to remain completely agnostic when it comes to energy and embrace anything new that comes along, as long as it meets the needs of the people and it can, it's affordable for us. And the one thing I will say about the Coalition's plan for nuclear energy is I would be advocating for the ownership of those public assets. If they are paid for by the taxpayer, then we must take it to a referendum and enshrine that public ownership in the Constitution. Otherwise, we may face in future years legislative change after a change of government, which may see those assets sold off. And if the government is going to pay for those, what we must do is stop socialising the costs and privatising the profits. If it does come to fruition, we do accept nuclear energy and build nuclear reactors.
All right.
Paid for by the taxpayer, then it must be enshrined in the Constitution that they remain the property of the taxpayer.
All right. Senator Rennick, I'm actually interested in your thoughts, because obviously you're a former member of the LNP. It is your former party's, I think you're in the party when Peter Dutton first started talking about nuclear, which has become a big issue with this election. As a People First senator now, is that part of your energy plan?
Yeah, thanks, Leo. I support all forms of homegrown energy, so that's coal, gas and nuclear. I believe that we need baseload power stations, and I believe the government needs to build them. I don't support the Coalition's policy in terms of using nuclear to phase out coal. If anything, they should be phasing out renewables. Look, if people want to put solar panels on their roof or they drive an electric car, that's fine. I just don't think they should be subsidised, and that's one of People's First policies, is to abolish all subsidies for renewables or any other energy mix for that matter. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I grew up in a state when we had something like 14 coal-powered fire stations, and we had the cheapest energy in Queensland throughout the 80s, just relying on homegrown coal. And the Finkel report in 2017 showed that the cheapest energy in Australia was actually the coal-fired power stations. And that's because basically the state government here in Queensland owns many of the coal mines that power those coal-powered fire stations, in particular Kogan Creek and Tarong Energy, and that means the actual raw materials are free that go into it. So that generates recurring revenue for the state of Queensland, and that recurring revenue then goes on and pays for schools and hospitals, which is incredibly important to make sure that we meet our requirement to provide essential services, and it also provides cheap energy to our small business that are vital if we are to have a productive economy that pays enough taxes so we can meet our bills and provide essential services.
I know Senator Roberts is sitting there patient. I'll get to you in just a moment, but I just want to stick to Senator Rennick for just a moment on a separate matter, because with the People First policies, I was looking through some of them. There's calls for a public bank, government insurance office, things like this. Do you think government intervention can actually help the economy in the situation it's in? Is that really the solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, I grew up in a country where we had a public-private partnership. So we had a number of private banks and we had one public bank, the Commonwealth Bank. And I can guarantee you that had the Commonwealth Bank still been in public government hands, all those private banks would not have shut branches in the regions, which means that our small business can access cash. Our people can go and get face-to-face services, and we'd still have fixed term home loans longer than 5 years. So, and I actually think that it was the privatisation of the Commonwealth Bank, along with introducing superannuation, that led to the Royal Commission into financial misconduct in the private sector. Likewise, privatising SGIO up here has led to rapid insurance increases. with a government-owned insurance bank, we can eliminate the cost of reinsurance. 50% of insurance costs in this country are reinsurance costs paid by our private insurers to foreign reinsurers. So we can reduce, by having a government insurance bank, we believe that we can reduce the cost of insurance and we can bring more people back into the insurance pool, which again will lower costs. And finally, an infrastructure bank will basically fund the construction of 7 sovereign assets, dams, power stations, road, rail, ports, airports and telecommunications. And what that means is that we don't have to pay interest to foreign countries to use their currency, because as a sovereign country, we should use the equity we already have in our own sovereign wealth rather than waste money paying interest to foreign banks against our own title.
Senator Roberts, does One Nation support a public bank or other federal government intervention in economic matters?
Wholeheartedly, very enthusiastically, and we were the first to raise it in the modern parliament. I want to point out that we had a People's Bank, a Commonwealth Bank, as it was originally called, back in 1910. The Fisher Labor government introduced it with legislation, and it performed very, very well. Took us through the First World War without any debt. It enabled us to increase our trade, build our industry. The Commonwealth Bank as a people's bank was absolutely wonderful. We support it not only because of the reasons of providing superior competition, but accountability. When the private banks, let's face it, Leo, the private banks are the 4 big ones, NAB, ANZ, Westpac and Commonwealth, have basically the same share registers when it comes to the international firms that own them. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. They control a controlling interest in these 4 banks. We have one bank not hiding behind 4 logos. Same policies, same strategies, same services, and their products are almost identical. What we would have if we had another People's Bank, which is what we've been advocating for many years now, is we would have accountability to force those banks to actually compete and on merit. That's what happened with the first Commonwealth Bank under the governorship of Denison Miller, and it was a fantastic success. The only bank in the whole of North America that has made a profit in every year of its existence is the State Bank of North Dakota, which is the People's Bank owned by the state government. It's the only bank that's performed well throughout its career, throughout its history. It provides loans to individuals, small businesses, farmers. That's what we need in this country. A new People's Bank.
Jim Willmott, your party, the Libertarian Party, is against a lot of government ownership of businesses. I know you talk, and the party talks about private sectors doing things that public sectors might be currently doing. Does that mean you're against a public bank?
Of course. We've just had a conversation in our opening statements and a little bit further on about the government's too big. We've got too much bureaucracy, too much red tape, and we want to build a people's bank. We want to build a government insurance bank. That's just increasing the size of the bureaucracy. And to talk about accountability, well, how accountable is this government at the moment? Are we going to go to a people's bank and they say, well, Jim, look, you're a farmer. You've got cows that burp and fart, so we won't give you any more money to buy the property next door, mate, because, you know, it's all about climate change and lowering emissions. I think it's ridiculous. And I just want to go back to Belinda's comment there where, you know, she supports the rollout of renewables. So, Belinda, have you seen the videos of them blowing the tops off mountains, the Great Divide? Knocking over trees with koalas in it. So you're fine with that, and you're fine for us to import all this garbage from China because it's all made in China with coal that we export and they dig out of the ground. So you're fine with that, mate. So you're okay with what's happening there.
Belinda?
Well, yes, we do. We wholeheartedly support renewables. And as I've said, we remain open to new technologies on the energy market. And I would say that, I mean, I grew up half in Sydney and half in the Hunter Valley. My grandparents were in Aberdeen. So I'm very, very familiar with the Hunter Valley. And if you go to some of the open cut coal mines and look at the environmental destruction they have wrought upon our waterways, aquifers, the environment, and visually, they are far more obscene to the eye than any renewables that are being built. And we have farmers who are now enjoying multiple streams of income. They're able to put solar panels at a height and still graze sheep and cattle underneath. So
that's animal cruelty, mate. That is animal cruelty to put sheep and cattle where there's solar panels. Do you know what happens to them? Sheep are getting cut and maimed. That is actually dangerous to put sheep and cattle in those panels. And, you know, they didn't give us warnings like the Livestock Protection Authority saying there's a question there. I filled it out the other day. Do you have stock grazing where there's solar panels or wind turbines? Luckily, I don't, because I hate the damn things. Because if you do you have plans to move them? Well, that stinks like there is a contamination issue with solar panels, large-scale solar panels and wind turbines. We know the stuff that flakes off the blades, bisphenol A, is actually dangerous and contaminates waterways. And we are sticking these damn things up the top of our catchments along with battery packs and solar factories. And you think it's great. And guess it, they don't have to rehabilitate these areas, Belinda. There's no laws. They can just go after 20, 25 years and leave it the way it is. Say they can't afford it. At least with coal mines, you've got rehabilitation bonds and there's laws there to make them rehabilitated. I just think it's an absolute farce.
I am conscious of time, Belinda. If you want to give a response in about 20, 30 seconds, go ahead.
Well, thank you. I respect your opinion, Jim. One of the key values of our party is personal freedoms and freedom of speech. And often that means hearing things that we don't particularly like or don't agree with, and that's fine. And as long as we don't cross the line into hate speech. And it is a very emotive issue. And what we are focused on are solutions, finding the facts and sorting out the chaff from the wheat on the energy crisis. And let's stop debating and stop being climate denialists. We have a problem with climate change. And I've just been through Cyclone Alfred, so we need to address this, and we need to address it in a calm and measured way based on facts that will provide the best solutions for power for all Australians. And I will just say, for the cost of one nuclear energy reactor, we could fund standalone solar panels and batteries for every dwelling. There are 11 million dwellings in Australia, so every house in Australia would have a standalone system for the cost of one reactor.
I am just really conscious of time. Just very circling back to what we were mentioning about the banks. Just very quickly, Senator Roberts. Mr. Willmott made a point there about, you know, do we want the Albanese government managing this because obviously they're the government, or would we want another government, a big government, managing a bank and controlling that? Does he have a point on that argument?
He does have a point in that argument, but there are two factors that point against it very much. First of all, Jim doesn't know what we know. We know that the banks control the government. That is a fact. John Howard made legislation that made the banks all powerful in this country. They haven't been scaled back. After all the rorts, the fraud, the intimidation, the theft, the blackmail from the banks that was uncovered in the latest Royal Commission, not one executive has gone to jail. Not one. Some have paid fines, but minimal fines. The second thing I need to point out is that the government, back when the original Commonwealth Bank was the People's Bank, the government was separate from the bank. It had the key to that, the success of the Commonwealth Bank back then was the fact that Denison Miller was a very independent governor, and he managed that bank well. They found a bank executive to manage the bank, and he did a fantastic job. And what's more, people voted with their feet. They opened up bank accounts in the Commonwealth Bank, and that was because they had a superior service. That was the government. Sorry, not a government owned. It's the people's bank, not a government bank.
All right, I am again just conscious of time, and I know I said a minute max, but you know it is 8:30, so we'll be very conscious of time. I'm sure candidates understand that. On a completely separate matter, Ms. Jones, I think everyone watching tonight understands what your party's main policy is: legalising cannabis. Given the Greens are already in Parliament, they've introduced a bill to legalise cannabis. Why shouldn't voters just vote for them if they want that done?
Legalise Cannabis Party's policy is far more comprehensive than the Greens' policy. The cannabis plant has the potential to feed us, clothe us, house us, fuel us and medicate us. So the Greens policy is 1/5 of our policy. We are really focused on embracing the hemp industry, and what that will do will provide a domestic manufacturing industry in the areas of food and fibre production, biofuels, building materials and medicine that will act as a buffer against international headwinds which disrupt our supply chains and push prices up. So our policy is so comprehensive, it extends across 8 or more portfolio areas, from education, health, the Attorney General's, agriculture, infrastructure, jobs, treasury and revenue. It is a completely comprehensive policy that offers real solutions for Australians, particularly in rural and regional area, to improve education standards, to improve their cost of living prices and increase their income, which will flow back through, that money will flow through those rural communities and support entire communities. I believe if we embrace the hemp industry, it has the potential to outdo the resources industry. Now, currently, our resources industry, I think 2023, we received 74 billion in revenue to the Treasury from our resources. The total amount sold was over $450 billion. So out of $450 billion in resources, Australian taxpayers got 74 billion, which is about 1/10 of our national budget. It used to be said that resources really supported our budget, but it's getting less and less so because the resources companies are taking off the profits offshore, and it's the taxpayer who's missing out on those. So we can embrace the hemp industry. We can outdo the resources industry in terms of revenue, I believe.
All right.
Leo, could I jump in there?
Senator Roberts, go ahead. Yep.
Thank you very much. For years, One Nation has worked very hard to make Australian, natural, whole plant medicinal cannabis available to every Australian with a medical need through a doctor or practitioner prescription and filled on the Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme. To achieve that, I tabled a bill in 2023. The Liberals, the Labor Party and the Greens did not support it. We support whole plant medicine for medicinal cannabis. We support the hemp industry because I agree with Belinda Jones. It's a marvelous industry, for also clothing, textiles, you name it, paper substitute. Hemp has proven itself. It was driven out of business, as was medicinal cannabis, because they were successful and could not be patented. That is fact. We need to revive the medicinal cannabis and the hemp industries.
Can I just quickly add?
Very quickly, yep.
Currently, the hemp industry is in its infancy. And if a farmer plants a crop of hemp and under DPI rules, if the THC level is too high, that farmer has to destroy that crop. And that is not incentivizing the hemp industry. And we need to remedy that.
All right, Senator Rennick, I'm interested in your thoughts here because we were just talking about the economy before. You just heard Ms Jones there make the argument that this is something that could help the economy. Would you support legalising cannabis on that basis, or do you support it on any basis?
Yeah, so people first support medicinal cannabis, and by all means we support hemp. My understanding of it is that hemp is allowed to be grown now, but it's regulated by the state government rather than the federal government. So, I mean, go for it. And I've said this to many people. I wish the hemp industry the best of luck. And, if you want me to write to the state premiers or the relevant state ministers about making it easier to grow hemp, I'm more than happy to do that. But Leo, can I just want to touch on a remark there by Jim Willmott, where he accused of having a bank and a government insurance office as being more bureaucracy. They are actually public service roles, and it's very important that we distinguish between the bureaucracy and public service. Now, public service is things like teachers, nurses, our policemen, and providing services like our defence forces. And I've always been a strong advocate of our frontline workers, but no one has stood up more to the over-regulation of bureaucracy in government than myself in estimates. But I think that's an important to distinguish delineation to make. But back to hemp, look, all for it, and I'm happy to work with whatever state government, to change whatever rules it is to make it work. I mean, if it can, it's obviously got a lot of potential, and I hope that it goes ahead.
All right. I am again conscious of time. Jim Willmott, I know the Libertarian Party does support legalisation. You can go to the website if we want a full policy. I am just very conscious of time here.
Leo, can I just have a right of reply to
very quickly?
Yeah, mate. And I'm all for frontline public service people. I used to be one for many years myself. It's funny though. You ask the managers and the administrators behind the front line and ask them, who do you work for, mate? You're a public service. You know what they say? I work for the government of the day. I don't work for the public. So who do you think in the banking industry, if we create a public bank, who are they going to work for, mate? They're going to work for the government of the day. They're not frontline services, Gerard. Mate, it's there in black and white. People in the administration and management section, they work for the government of the day. They don't work for the public. And they'll tell you that. That's why it's politicized. That's why the danger is.
Yeah, I refute that. Nurses and teachers don't become nurses and teachers to work for the government. They go there to serve the people and help the people.
Totally. But they are accountable to the government of the day, mate. And they'll tell you that. Each manager behind them will tell you
work for the government. Were you working for the government, or were you working because you wanted to make Queensland a better state in agriculture?
So that's a question to me. Well,
yeah,
both. I was accountable to the government. I was accountable to the politicians that were in government.
Your motive was to serve the people, was it not?
My motive was to serve the people, but when you go up to your general manager or your director general, he say, Jim, we serve the government of the day, mate. We don't serve John and Harry living down the road growing hemp on their farm, buddy.
Yeah, I realise that. That's why I take it up to them in estimates. I mean, that's why I take it up to them in estimates. I mean, I go after the head honchos all the time, because I know, and I've had a lot of whistleblowers come to me who are very frustrated by what goes on, and that's why I go hard in estimates.
Jim, the State Bank of North Dakota has been a fantastic service to the state. The original Commonwealth Bank was a fantastic service to the whole country, and it had to compete with the major private banks at the time. It was dismantled by the Labor Party and the Liberal Party generation after generation. Why was it dismantled? Because the private banks controlled the government. That's why it was dismantled. The Commonwealth Bank was an absolutely essential public service.
I obviously, I know we're talking about banks a lot. I will kind of just leave that one there, but I appreciate everyone's thoughts on it. I know this is a fiery debate, but we appreciate the rebuttal and the discussion, and we, of course, encourage rebuttal. Mr. Willmott, I want to give this question to you, separate matter. Your partner on the Libertarian Senate ticket, Lachlan Lade, he said last month, quote, I do not stand with Ukraine. Foreign policy is a big issue, and it's something that federal senators obviously have to deal with. Do you agree with his statement?
I agree that we shouldn't be sending any Australian troops to Ukraine. I agree that we should not provide more resources to Ukraine so that young men and women keep dying every day. So is that say I support? I just want it to stop, and I want the killing to stop, and I don't see how putting more resources to fund the war is going to stop people getting killed every day.
Senator Roberts, I'm interested in your view on this issue, because I know your party has previously taken the stance that Ukrainian Australians have the right to go and defend their democracy. We're now 3 years into that war. Do you still support that stance and in support of Ukraine's fight?
Leo, that's a very good question. On the very first day of the Russian entry into Ukraine, we had a little note placed on our desk in the Senate. It was a statement that Maurice Payne was about to read. And at 3 o'clock, I think it was 3 o'clock, she came in and read this statement. And it was condemning Putin and condemning the Russians. We will stop the tyrants and the end of democracy and all this kind of stuff. And I sat there and paused. I watched as senators filed in, Green senators, Liberal senators, Labor Party senators, National Party senators, all said, yes, kill Putin, kill the Russians. And I got up to speak. I made some notes. I got up to speak. And I said, how about we just pause? How about we just think? How about we just ask some questions instead of following the Americans into yet another conflict overseas? How about we do that? Now, we've had troops training Ukrainians, apparently. We've had materials and weapons sent to Ukraine on our behalf. I don't want any Australians in Ukraine. That is a fight for the Europeans. I don't want people serving over there. That's a fight for the Europeans. But we certainly, and Senator Hanson has been condemned for celebrating the diggers that are actually working in Ukraine. They didn't choose to go there. They were sent there. We will always support the diggers. We will always support the vets, people who've served our country. They've served our country valiantly. And so we support the people who are there, but we don't support, I don't support the policy of sending them there.
All right. Jim Willmott, just again on this, you know, it is something that is going to continue to pop up in Parliament if you're elected as a senator. In terms of foreign policy, I think I've seen some of your party making comments on social media. You're pushing for kind of an Australia first agenda in regards to that. Is that also your personal stance in regards to foreign policy and wars, like across the board?
Oh, well, look, I think our defence capacity nationally is a disgrace. And when you've got roving Chinese Navy vessels going around Australia, with no rebuttal from us, that is a disgrace. We're lambs to the slaughter at the moment. We need to increase our defence capability, but that doesn't say that we can't help our allies overseas. I'm against actually troop deployments overseas unless there's allies are being invaded. I'd put like our knowledge, our resources, and our training. But I'd really have to think long and hard about sending troops overseas to places like Ukraine. That's for sure.
All right. Just very quickly, back to you, Senator Roberts, because I know just on your stance there, you were talking about not having Australians' boots on the ground. Obviously, there's a difference between government deployment and not. That is a stance. But, I mean, it was your party saying that Australians with Ukrainian citizenship should be allowed to fight. Is it, just to be clear, are you still sticking with that stance that Australians with Ukrainian citizenship should be allowed to fight in Ukraine at the moment?
We believe people should be able to do whatever they choose to do. And if they want to be, in my opinion, silly enough to go back to Ukraine and fight, that's their business. But Australia is a free country. Well, it was a free country prior to COVID. And we're trying to get that freedom back. But Australians should be free to do whatever they want so long as it doesn't hurt other people in Australia. But let me just take up a point that from Jim Willmott, build on him. The problem with Australia's defence forces is the top brass. I've exposed that repeatedly in Senate estimates. The top brass make rules for themselves. They lack respect from the ranks of the enlisted. We see that repeatedly. The instances, I've got an inquiry going in the Senate right now that I got up into the awarding of medals and honours. The top brass are giving themselves prizes, honours, awards, and the rank and file are missing out. This does not augur well. Our key strategic weapon in our defence, this was told to me by senior defence people many decades ago, our key strategic weapon is the sense of mateship, and it's being destroyed by the top brass in this country. I have called them out repeatedly, and also by the politicians who are supposedly looking after and overseeing the defence forces. The other thing I would say is that it sends a terrible signal to our current enlisted people and new recruits when we can't get enough recruits to replace the people who are leaving. And that is partly because of the fact that we treat our veterans so poorly. We send them, we bend them, but we don't mend them. And that has to fix. We have to fix up our whole defence forces, starting at the top and developing accountability and getting pride back into the uniform. The enlisted have pride. They really serve very, very well. But their top brass is letting them down terribly. And we will keep after the government on that, holding both governments accountable, the Labor government and the Liberal Nationals.
All right. Getting back home now, housing is undoubtedly a key issue at this election. It's especially a big issue for young people such as myself, people around my age thinking about owning or renting even at the moment. Senator Rennick and, well, actually, this is a question for all really, but I'll start with you, Senator Rennick, because as crossbench senators, elected currently or not, you obviously have the ability to be voting on key government housing legislation. We've seen it in the past term of government. What's your solution to dealing with, I think, what is undoubtedly a housing crisis?
Yeah, thanks, Leo. That's a great question. Look, our solution, we've obviously got a number of them because it's a complex issue. We need, first of all, to lower immigration. We need to increase the number of tradies in this country. We need to send our children to, get them into doing more. We need more of our children doing apprenticeships rather than just, going off to university. The other thing we need to do is obviously lower income tax to increase disposable income for low income earners. We want to make superannuation voluntary so young people can actually save up for their retirement. We want to pay childcare directly to the parents so that they can choose the type of childcare they want, or they can pocket it if a parent decides to stay at home. So that will actually make it easier for people to actually be able to afford or pay off their mortgage. And as well as that, we're prepared to get rid of the 50% CGT discount and use that to increase the tax-free threshold from 40,000 up to 50,000, if not higher. And that way, then it'll actually increase disposable income and make it easier for younger people and those who are out of the market to increase their disposable income. And the other thing we want to do is reintroduce capital controls. And that's where basically in 1985, Paul Keating lifted capital controls. The four major banks had $8 billion in foreign debt. By 2008, they had $800 billion in foreign debt. All that debt was lent against housing. That increased the price of houses from 4 to 5 times earnings, 12 to 13 times earnings. It meant that two parents had to go back to work. It meant that we had to put our children into childcare. So not having controls on the type of capital, just like we want controls on immigration, human capital, we also need controls on financial capital. And my understanding of global capital markets, having worked through global capital markets with Westfield and the Bank of Queensland, as well as having a Masters of Applied Finance in Treasury and Tax Law and another Masters in Tax Law, gives me a unique insight how to fix these what we call wholesale funding problems that have caused much of the house price inflation over the last 4 decades.
All right, Ms. Jones, you're obviously not an incumbent senator, but as I mentioned, we have seen plenty of housing-related things come up the past 3 years. I'm interested in some of the proposals being talking about. What about rent control? Do you support that? And then also, just as an aside, would you have voted on the signature housing package that the Albanese government was pushing through?
When it comes to rent controls, that's very much to do with state legislation and controlling the rental market, which really does work like most competitive markets through supply and demand. And that would be a very difficult thing to do and would probably cause a lot of collateral damage in the economy in doing so. You're also taking away personal freedoms and property rights that fundamentally, under our rule of law, if you own a property and you want to rent it out for $1,000 a week, that's your prerogative to do so. And the market forces are designed to temper that. I do agree with what some of the other speakers on the panel have said about we need to look at tax reform in terms of housing, looking at capital gains, tax, negative gearing, and short stay accommodation particularly, and see if those things are working for Australians the way they should be. Are they still fit for purpose, or can we make them better? In terms of immigration, we support sustainable immigration in terms of bringing in skilled immigrants or who fill those gaps in the labour force, but also the unskilled immigrants that come in under backpackers or our palm workers. If you recall back to the days after COVID, we had crops rotting on the ground because our palm workers couldn't get here. Now, that's a mutually beneficial arrangement which supports Australian farmers and it supports our Pacific Islander families, and it's mutually beneficial. So there are some cohorts within immigration that we would not change. But those, the reason we're bringing in tradies is because we need to build houses. And what we should be doing is using those sorts of job opportunities on that list as our primary focus for education and help our own tradies. One of the biggest problems is apprentices are so low paid that they cannot afford housing and they give up their apprenticeship. And so we would advocate for looking at a comprehensive look across tax reform and jobs.
All right. I'm, again, just conscious of time. Mr. Willmott, I'm just interested as well. Your party, the Libertarian Party, again, talks about property rights a lot. We mentioned, respecting the rights of individuals before, etc., etc. Given though that housing is, I think, pretty bluntly, just so bad in this country at the moment, so bad for young people. I'm dreading even thinking about in a few years worrying about a housing market. Right? Isn't there something that the government should be doing instead of just leaving it to, well, the market or individuals to figure it out?
Well, Leo, my answer to that is when government gets involved, look what's happened. Really, the government of the day is the main blocker for young people getting into a house. Look at the green and red tape. Look at all the different regulations that have been brought into the National Construction Code. And look, that's adding something like 20 to 30% to make sure your house is climate change compliant. And really, we want to trim those things back. A young family living in a tent down by the Glenrock Creek, where I live, doesn't really worry about if the house they live in is climate change compliant, mate. We've got to get more people into houses. We've got to build more people, build more houses. We've got to limit immigration so we can catch up and build more houses. And we've got to, like tradies, like that, we've got Albanese saying, oh, we want, 55% of Australians to get a degree. Well, what about 55% or 80% of Australians getting a trade? The trade is still like a dirty word when it shouldn't be. Young people should be looking at a trade as a way to earn a lot of money and have a great career. So I agree with what people have said here today. We need more people in the trades. Mindful of time, I'm just going to leave it there, Leo.
All right, Senator Roberts, just quickly, I think you mentioned in your intro very early on, you mentioned specifically young people in relation to housing. So again, what's One Nation going to do about this for younger voters?
It's what we have been doing. I've been speaking out against massive immigration that's causing the housing problem for about 3 years now. We've finally cracked it, and we finally got Labor and Liberal to admit that it's a problem, but they put in stops for policies. So let me tell you, our policies work on demand, reducing demand, improving supply, reducing building prices, and reducing loan payments by fixing inflation. And you see that in our economic policies. The key is to stop mass immigration. The Albanese government and the Morrison government before them used mass immigration to stop the per capita recession becoming a recession. We will stop immigration and allow only 130,000 people in every year. When you take into account the 220,000 that leave, that's a net negative of 90,000. We will deport 75,000 people who are here illegally. We will reduce foreign students. We currently have 600,000 students in the country. We have beds for 100,000. It's become a Ponzi scheme. It's a way to get cheap labor into the country. We have $10 billion a year sent overseas from these students. We will ban foreign ownership of housing and farms and give people 2 to 3 years to sell up. Many of these houses are locked up. The percentage of foreign ownership is not even known by the federal government. We will cut GST on construction materials, housing materials. We will increase the land release. We will review the National Construction Code, which, as Jim Willmott pointed out, costs an average house builder about $49,500 per house. We will change the current Albanese government Housing Future Fund and convert it to a people's mortgage, 5%, 30-year fixed interest rates, incorporate the HEXT into that, and also allow access for the super fund to super account to invest in your house. We would also say that we want to address the quality of immigration because that needs to be increased. The current Albanese government is saying that they are bringing in tradies. That is a complete lie. We have 0.6% of the immigrants are in construction. They're building houses for the 99.4% who are not in construction. Every one of the 130,000 that we allow in must have a skill.
All right, Senator, thank you. Again, I am conscious of time here. I do want to move on to another issue, though. And Senator Rennick, I'll direct this at you first. Your party, the People First Party, it's the newest one of the four that we have here, and you formed it less than a year ago. There's a lot of these kind of so-called freedom parties that exist. There are three here tonight, including yourself. Belinda Jones is also here with Legalise Cannabis. I'm interested. You formed this. Are you just not splitting the vote further among the people who are sick of the major parties, but also aren't going to be going off to the Greens or anything like that?
Thanks, Leo. No, not at all. I was basically left in a situation, thanks to the Liberal Party stitching up my pre-selection where they cheated. I put the evidence in front of a Supreme Court judge, and despite the fact that the Liberal Party didn't even dispute the evidence showing that they cheated, the Supreme Court judge basically ruled that he was unable to rule on a party's constitution. So I had to stay in the party and fight that on behalf of the people that voted for me within that party. In order to be above the line in the Senate, you need to be in a party, which I needed to do. I have been contacted by thousands, if not tens of thousands of people across the country to run again. The Libertarians had already picked Jim. Malcolm was already on the One Nation ticket. The Palmer Party was deregistered. I believe that People First can offer solutions as a protectionist party. Unlike the Libertarian Party, we do believe that government does have a role in terms of serving the people, and we don't trust big government or big corporations. Having worked in the private sector all my life, I know that big corporations aren't the same as small businesses, and we need to distinguish between the two. I believe I also have youth on my side. I will be prepared. People First will set up branches across the country, and I believe that I have the organisational capability to actually set up a party that can lift the vote from about 10% of the people, let's call it the freedom movement, for want of a better word. I know many of your listeners hate that term, but we'll call it that. I believe that People First can lift the vote from about 10% to, say, 20%.
But it's interesting you're doing that, because I remember when you did announce this, and we know the circumstances with the allan pre-selection. It really just sounded like this was just a vehicle to get you elected above the line, and then all of a sudden we've got lower house candidates. You're popping up in other states. What changed?
Just support from the people. Like as I said, I've been contacted by thousands of people that want me to run more and more candidates, and I've actually had to not stop candidates from running because we just don't have the resources to run so many. But in terms of lower house candidates, we've got to have lower house candidates on the ground in order to increase the vote in the upper house. But I think we have some very good candidates across the state. They are fully committed to serving the people of Australia, and I look forward. And the other thing is I want to actually get state divisions up in other states, because I believe if we really want to hold the two major parties to account, we need to get 12 senators up in the Senate. And I think that our policies are the right policies that can attract a large portion of the vote to do just that and get a blocking state initially, and then eventually move in and start taking lower house seats as well.
All right, Senator Roberts, I'm interested in your view on this. You've been in Parliament, obviously, continuously since 2019 and a bit before that, representing One Nation. Have you or your party had discussions with other kind of like-minded parties about coalitions and mergers in that time? And if so, why haven't they gone anywhere?
Well, we've had Clive Palmer try to buy us out, but we're not for sale. We've had other parties approach us to join up. We've even had someone approach us from the Libertarians saying that I'm such a good senator, I've got to be re-elected. They won't run anyone in Queensland so long as we don't run anyone else in New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia. Oh, and we can run something in Western Australia. We're not interested in a cabal. One Nation is the largest by far of the smaller parties, the freedom parties. We're almost a medium-sized party. We are on the verge of getting a senator in every state. We just missed out in Western Australia. We just missed out in South Australia. We just missed out in Victoria. We were 7th out of 6th in New South Wales. We are the only party that's capable of taking that last seat in the Senate in many states. That gives us the only opportunity to have the balance of power in the Senate and stop the Liberal Labor club from ruining this country.
Fair enough.
We're in favour of other people starting the parties if they want to. That's the democracy. More the merrier.
Yeah, fair enough if you don't want to be bought out, and we've seen with Clive Palmer and Trumpeter Patriots, but even things like coalitions, joint tickets. I mean, One Nation's been around since 1997, and you've had plenty of representatives elected at all levels of government. But I'm sure you realise at this point that this amount of parties can't be sustainable if you're wanting to build up this anti-major party movement.
Well, Leo, it's very interesting. Back about 6 years ago, Senator Hanson was asked by other parties to merge. And she said, you're collapsing, you're falling over, you've got no prospects for the future. And sure enough, at each election, more and more of them are folded, and they're slowly coming into One Nation. So as I said, we are the only ones capable of getting that 6th seat in 6 states. That would give us 7 senators in the parliament. That's just from this election. So that's a matter of fact.
You don't think any other party has those? I mean, the UAP won a seat in Victoria last time. We've got these other parties here because we think they've got a realistic chance. You're not so adamant about that?
No, we're not. We'll work with them, but I'll tell you what happens when we work with some of them. Clive Palmer's party, the United Australia Party, entered joint forums at my suggestion. Entered joint forums. We had Libertarian, United Australia, and One Nation candidates having joint forums in the 2022 election. I sponsored some of them, encouraged them. So did Topher Field from the then Libertarians, and we said, put your party first, put the other minors next, 2, 3, 4, put the Liberals and Labor second last, the Greens last. And Clive Palmer even started shouting, put the majors last. Well, when we came to find out the how to vote tickets from the United Australia Party, they put the Liberals number 2. So we can't trust some people. And trust is extremely important to me. We've had people lying in recent weeks, telling people lies about us. We can't have that. We can't work with people like that because trust is extremely important. Senator Hanson has made very, very clear that she is completely trustworthy. She's completely competent. She's honest, and she's passionate about our country. And that's what we believe in One Nation.
Just very quickly, because I don't want it to become just a formal interview at this point. But I know One Nation did, and we stress recommend because how to vote cards are recommendations. But you did recommend, I think, there was a small handful of seats above Labor. Are you saying now you're going to be putting the majors last again, and you're going to be putting the freedom parties above, or is that just not your call to make?
No. What happens, Leo, is that we look at the overall tactic, which is smaller parties, freedom parties first before the major parties. But if there's an outstanding candidate from one of the majors, we will recommend that candidate. We go on the quality of the candidate and the quality of the policies.
All right, we'll look forward to seeing how to vote cards from all parties.
I think you'll find that they'll be minors.
Leo, can I just have a right of reply?
Go ahead quickly. Yeah.
Look, and I agree with Senator Rennick here that the only way we're going to go over the line and get enough freedom senators in is to some kind of alliance. And that's why the Libertarians have stepped up with the Heart Party and People's First Party to actually give it a go and then work hard behind the scenes in the next 3 years as well to make more of an impact with an alliance in the next 3 years. But, the key thing with the Libertarians that I don't see in any of these other parties, and excuse me, Belinda, I don't know if you've got these, is branches. Like we have got 33 branches across Australia now, and we are building branches. Another one in Bundaberg started up the other day. So they are our foundation. And that is what people are coming to the Libertarians for. Because you know why? Because they are sick of the top-down approach and being told what to do and who to vote for. They want the bottom up. And that is why we're growing. But quite open to have alliances with Malcolm and with any other freedom party that wants to come on board, because I know we're going to have to do that to make a difference.
The way to have alliances is to recommend minor parties as preferences ahead of the major parties.
You didn't do that in the state election, Malcolm, where you've got the Morani member, Steve Andrews. You actually put the LNP before him. And
we'd have to, Jim, as a matter of integrity, because we didn't endorse him. We didn't endorse him because of that. So we can hardly say that.
He was a very popular member, and you endorsed an unknown LNP candidate above him out of spite.
Do you think Pauline would get rid of a hard-working member? No, she wouldn't.
I thought he was
that's why we as I said, we preference minors ahead of majors, and except when there are exceptional circumstances.
Well, sorry, Malcolm. I thought Stephen Andrews was hardworking.
Yeah.
Well,
may I have the right to reply on that?
Very quickly.
Just to what Jim said. Legalise Cannabis Party was formerly known as the Hemp Party, and we are very well established across the nation. We have sitting members in the state-led parliaments in WA, New South Wales and Victoria. We are running Senate candidates in every state except for Tasmania at this stage, and we'll be fielding as many members in the House of Representatives as possible. And over the past few years, we've been a constant presence in all levels of government So
how many branches have you got, Belinda? How many branches?
We have branches
How many?
in every state across the nation.
All right then. Just also, I just want to quickly ask this before I move on to the next thing in a moment. Just because it was kind of brought up by Mr. Willmott there, Senator Roberts, is that One Nation, respectfully has had a lot of members come and go in its, 25 years since founding. A lot have quit the party while in office. Is that a problem if you're wanting to keep building it up, that you just every so often you lose some? I mean, it happened last year. I think it happened the year before. Is that a problem that's facing One Nation?
The problem we've had with the candidates who've left are those who've come from other parties and said, please let us in. And Pauline's done that as a favour, and that's not turned out well. But when you look at our candidates, you look at me, for example, I'm so loyal to One Nation and to Australia and to Pauline. You look at our state MP in Victoria, Ricky Lee Tyrrell. You look at Sarah Game in South Australia. You look at Rod Caddies in Western Australia now. We got one, possibly two people up in the last state election. So that's the way I would answer your question, Leo.
That it's just ones from, is it the ones coming from other parties?
Well, Steve Andrews,
some of these are elected as One Nation for the first time, and then they're just gone within like a year for some reason.
Name someone.
Like most of them, Queensland 1998. I can bring up the full list.
That's a very interesting thing, and that raises a very important issue. The Liberal Party and the Labor Party were scared to death when Pauline Hanson got 23% of the vote in the 1998 state election. John Howard and Peter Beattie worked together to try and destroy Pauline Hanson's One Nation. Our party is still here despite both the majors pointing their guns wholly on One Nation and trying to destroy us. We are still here because we still listen to the people and we still tell the truth. And Pauline is a rock for now 28 years.
You mentioned Charles Smith was elected as One Nation and quit the party.
That was 2011, 1998, as I said.
That was 2019. No, Charles Smith was 2019. He was in WA.
Sorry, that was Western Australia. You're correct.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. 1998. And we don't want to have a whole discussion about 1998.
But no one has faced the pressure that One Nation has faced, and we're still surviving. No one has faced the pressure that Pauline Hanson. She's the only political prisoner to be jailed in this country, and she's still standing and still fighting for Australians.
Yeah. And to your credit, you have been in the party for elected 6 years, if you include the 2016-17 term, and you have absolutely stuck
7 years.
But
what's a
no
year?
Doubt. 7, yeah, exactly. Now we
look at Ricky Lee Tyrrell and Sarah Game and Rod Caddies in Western Australia now.
Yeah,
fine
absolutely.
People.
Well, yeah, we'll see. But you're right.
We have gone through growing pains. We have gone through growing pains, Leo. There's no denying that we've made mistakes, just like other parties. At least we're not destroying the country. We're building the country. And the other thing is we learned from our mistakes. We have now got solid systems in place right around the country.
Yeah, and again, to your party, as we covered on the weekend, had a good result.
How many branches have you got, Malcolm?
Well.
How many branches have you got, mate?
We've got branches in each state, Jim.
How many? So how many in Queensland? How many branches have you got?
We've got branches in each state, Jim. We've got New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, Victoria, Western Australia, Tassie.
So one branch in each state, right?
Correct.
All right. Now I was going to save the fiery bit for the end, but it's already happening. But I wanted to give, and we did want to give each candidate a chance to ask one other candidate a specific question of their own. We've kind of already done that, but we'll roll with the segment anyway, because I'm sure some people have prepared some. Now, we don't know, at 6 News, we do not know what's going to be asked. If you want to pass on this, I'm not sure anyone will, but if you want to pass on it, you have that option as well. Now, we've asked all candidates, please make sure your question is relatively short and please clearly direct it at someone so there's no confusion. Ms. Jones, I'll let you begin. If you've got a question for a fellow candidate, ask away.
Yes, I do. My question is for Senator Roberts. I would like to know, does One Nation support the legalisation of cannabis for adults over 18 and fully support non-medical?
Well, my question was going to be of you, Belinda. But for years, One Nation has worked hard, very hard, to make Australian natural whole plant medicinal cannabis available to every Australian with a medical need through a doctor or practitioner prescription.
I'm not talking about medicinal.
No, I understand that. I'm getting to it because I'm going to respond with an answer and then a question back to you, if I could, Leo.
Absolutely.
Now, to achieve that, I tabled a bill in 2023, the doctor or practitioner prescription and filled on the PBS. To achieve that, I tabled a bill in 2023. Liberals, Labor and Greens did not support it, as I said earlier. Why didn't they support it? Because the corporations that own Big Pharma control major Australian corporations and health departments. I'm sure you're aware of that. These corporations donate generously to the major parties and use massive advertising funds to control the media. While many Australians support Legalise Cannabis, many others show fear of the policy that the pharmaceutical media juggernaut drives and controls. So I would have a question back to you. We support medicinal cannabis. We support industrial use of hemp, industrial growing of hemp. We have concerns about recreational use at the moment. So my question back to you, Belinda, is would it be more effective to first establish easier access to medicinal cannabis, take the fear out of recreational use and out of cannabis, build knowledge of and trust in the herb, and then engage Australians in recreational use? In other words, we're open to that debate, but we don't think it's right to do it yet. We think it'd be better to put medicinal cannabis in place firmly and properly than industrial use, get people used to the concept of the herb, and then let them make a wise decision about it. At the moment, they're not ready for it.
Well, thank you for your question, Senator. It's a very positive outcome to think that you are thinking along those lines and open to debate on the issue. We really believe that it has the potential to remedy a lot of problems right across society, and medicinal has been available for many years now. It is actually very easy to get. So now we want to extend that and follow along the ACT's successful model and allow grow at home for those people who can't afford it. Also gifting their growing rights to community gardens so that they can grow for the disabled or the elderly who can't grow at home. And part of the legalising cannabis, which is one of the most vitally important parts, is once it is legalised, we will have a regulated supply. And then that means what we can do are authoritative peer-reviewed studies on all areas of health and through the economy about cannabis. And if we can get to that stage, those studies then form the basis of our fact-based knowledge around cannabis. And we must, I agree, take the people with us, work to raise awareness and, destroy those old myths about cannabis and the stigmatisation it's had to endure since the 20th century. It's an age-old herb that humanity has been using since the beginning of time, and for some reason that was demonised and stigmatised. So we would be very open to working with other members of the Senate to bring forth a Senate inquiry and other means, education campaigns to raise awareness so people are aware of the benefits of cannabis. And under our policy of personal freedoms, we believe the government then has the right to advise the Australian people and then step back and let them make the choice under our belief in bodily autonomy.
But just one thing I disagree with quickly, Leo, on that. I applaud what you've said, Belinda, most of it. One thing, though, I don't believe medicinal cannabis is yet free to access because it's still restricted unofficially by the pharmaceutical giants that control the health authorities in this country. It needs to be freed up much, much more.
All right. I am conscious of the time, but we can leave that one. Senator Rennick, if you've got a question for another candidate, the floor's yours.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Leo. My question's to Senator Roberts. You've repeatedly called me a liar for saying that you supported the two major parties in the hate crimes bill. I didn't say you voted for the bill. I just said you supported the major parties, and you voted against amendments that were going to exempt 14-year-olds. You voted against the good faith provision, and you voted against having a review of it after 6 months. You voted against mandatory sentencing, removing the mandatory sentencing, allowing the judge to apply some discretion. However, you did vote for Matt Canavan's good amendment that didn't get up, that wanted to clarify the definition of violence. Given that Plato once said that silence is consent, and we have worked together for many years calling out the two major parties, even when I was in the Liberal Party, for being silent on issues that mattered, don't you think that not voting against that hate crimes bill was actually supporting the two major parties? And why are you continually calling me a liar when many people view not taking a vote is actually supporting the bill?
Well, because you told a lie, Gerard. It's that simple. I've always trusted you, thought you were very honest until that time. I walked up to you in the Senate and said, you've just made a video saying that we supported the bill. And I said to you, that's not true, that's false. And you acknowledged that. And then I said, what you need to do is retract it. You acknowledged that, but you left it up there. And it was misleading, deliberately, blatantly misleading. Now, what we did was we sent a signal. Pauline and I were about to oppose the bill, because for two reasons: because of the way it was guillotined, but secondly, because of the language that was loose. But then we stopped and we paused, and we're not afraid to go against the two other groups. Six or 10 voted in opposition, and only 2 of us abstained, and 66 or so voted for it. What we said was that there are aspects of the bill where we've got Australian groups, not just religious groups, but medical groups, people with diseases, vilified and threatened with intimidation of physical force and violence. That is not acceptable in Australia. There are also
terrorism
concepts here.
We
so
have state laws for
what we
violence,
did was we decided that we would send a signal to those people that we see some merit in doing hate crimes. And I'm pleased you call it the hate crimes, not hate speech, the hate crimes bill, because that's what the title was. We said we'd send a signal to them that we don't appreciate the fact that they're living in under threats of violence and terror in this country. So we send a signal by abstaining. You know that just as well as I do, that sending a vote sometimes sends a signal.
Abstaining doesn't send a signal at all, Malcolm. And I said to you that we've already got laws at the state level that deal with violent crimes, and this is a duplication of laws at the federal level, and we don't need it because it just increases the size of the surveillance and security state at the federal level when state governments are actually responsible for violent and policing violent crimes.
Well, we got legal advice to say that it is necessary.
Well, can you explain why?
Because sometimes the states look at Men's in New South Wales. We've had Nazi symbols flying, and that's supposed to be a crime.
So, when Chris Richardson is currently in under court case in sorry, is it Chris Richardson? Sorry, I might have the wrong name there. I've just had a mind blank. Or Pete Evans got abused for putting up a black sun symbol that he didn't even know was a Nazi symbol. Are you saying under those hate crime laws, they could go to jail even though they weren't aware of what they were doing? Now, the Good Faith Amendment would have at least given them a chance to explain, well, we were actually, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I looked at that black sun symbol and I didn't even know it was a Nazi sign myself. When I looked at it, I thought I could have posted that not knowing what I was doing. I think it's Chris Richardson in Victoria, like he was honouring his grandparents saying they fought Nazis, and the ABC is trying to take him to court. So don't you think there should have been a good faith amendment in that you should have voted for that good faith amendment so that people who had no intentions of offending anyone, because that was the law, it wasn't to do with violence, it was from intent to reckless behaviour. There is absolutely no provision now where people have, their actions have been mistaken. There is no provision now for a good faith provision to exempt those people, or children who under 14 who wouldn't understand what they were doing when they did these things. Why don't you think those amendments should have got up?
Gerard, we did not support the bill. You falsely
voted against the amendment, Malcolm. You've voted
did not
against those
you asked me
amendments.
about the bill. We did not support the bill. We did not support the bill. You
Well,
told
when
a
you
lie
vote
in
against
saying that we
amendments
did.
and then
You
don't turn
told a
up to
lie
the
in saying
final
that
vote,
there were many things, and you know it just as well as I do. That bill was rushed into the Senate. It should not have been voted on. It should not have been guillotined.
that bill was known
a
about for
stitch-up.
weeks. It was on the notice paper for weeks, Malcolm, and we knew that it was going to actually get guillotined on the last day. I was waiting for it. I mean, Alex Antic and I were talking about it weeks in advance.
And what we did was we did not support the bill. And it was a lie when you told people that
You
we
voted
did.
against the amendment. No. It would have been a lie
if we can just let Senator Roberts reply, because it is directed him initially. I am conscious of time as well, Senator Roberts.
Well, there were two aspects of Gerard's original question. One was that why am I calling him a liar? Why am I saying he lied? Because he did lie. That's a fact. That's a fact. And he not only let the lie out there, he then left it out there for 220,000 people on X to see and to like. That was deliberate and blatant.
It wasn't deliberate, and I corrected it the following day, which you've never acknowledged.
No, you didn't, Gerard.
I explained why I took the position that you supported the bill.
You left the video up there
Friday
saying
morning.
you left your video up there saying
Because it
that
wasn't
One
just about
Nation
you, Malcolm. It
joined
was a
with the
6-minute
Liberal
video.
and Labor parties to support the bill. That is a lie.
It was a 6-minute video, Malcolm. It wasn't just about
That
you.
was
I
the
corrected the
opening
record
sentence,
on the Friday.
Gerard. That was the opening sentence, mate. You
Yeah,
told
and
a
you did.
lie.
You voted against amendments,
And
and
the day
Pauline and
before,
yourself said you were going to support it.
in the day before in the Senate, you were talking about the culture in the Liberal Party of dishonesty. And yet you told a lie, and yet you left that lie up there. That lie was sent around the world.
It's not a lie, Malcolm. If you don't support something, if you don't turn up to vote, your job is to turn up and vote in the Senate on important bills. I get sometimes there's procedural votes, but this was a very important bill that had to do with actually freedom of speech. And while it was called a hate crimes bill, it was designed to go after people who said things that could have been symbols of hate. The law changed from intent to reckless behaviour, so people could now, be mandatory thrown in jail for saying things. And you think that's all right? I mean, I'm disappointed in you that you can't acknowledge that you have not actually stood up against free speech in this country.
Gerard, we were the first to want to enshrine free speech in the Constitution, and we made a motion in the Senate to that effect. What we also
and
did,
I crossed the floor and voted with you on that one.
We said, remember, we didn't get an opportunity to speak in the Senate on the hate crimes bill.
Actually, you could. You weren't there, Malcolm.
I'm really just conscious of time. Leo. If Malcolm Roberts, Senator Roberts, can just make a final statement on this before we move, because I know Jim
Pauline and I told us.
Go ahead.
Pauline and I told the people that we were opposed to the bill because it was reckless, the language was not right, it was too loose and sloppy. We recognized that, but we wanted to send a signal to the people who are living in this country under threats of physical violence and force. We did not support the bill. What you said was we did, and that was a lie, and you left that lie up there as the opening to your video.
Yep.
All
stay there because you didn't vote against it.
We will leave it.
That means you can stay a lie.
All right. We will leave it at that. We still have one more question to get to. Jim Willmott, you have the option. Ask any candidate a question. Floor's yours.
I was going to ask Belinda a question, but I'm going to swap to Malcolm Roberts. And because I think this alliance that's been put together with People's First and the Heart Party is so important to getting more Freedom Party senators into the Senate. Is there any way, Malcolm, One Nation would look to join the Australia First alliance and even come to a preference deal this election or in any future elections, mate?
First of all, Jim, the way to actually recommend on a how to vote card that you preference the other minor parties 2, 3, 4. We'll be doing that. That's what we did last election. We'll be doing it again. That's an alliance. We don't need to say it's an alliance, but it is an alliance. That's a fact. And we also make the point repeatedly that preferences are not the parties to give. Preferences are the individual voters' own entitlement, own thing that they own themselves. Preferences are owned by the individual voter. What the voters do with them is up to the voter. But we will probably be recommending that we put One Nation One, the other minor parties, Libertarians, etc. Yes, Jim, you guys, before the Liberal Party and Labor Party.
And before the Greens, Malcolm, before the Greens.
Well, the Greens go last, Jim, no matter what happens.
Yes.
You know, we also like the Legalise Cannabis Party. We recommend swapping preferences with them. So so we're in favour of. We base our decisions based on the candidate and the policies.
That's all I got, Leo. I'll keep it short, mate.
All right. Well, Senator Roberts, very popular on the questions tonight. We're having a lot of fun, but we do want to wrap this up now. We want to give each candidate the chance to make a 1 minute, please keep it 1 minute, closing statement. Just to sum up, any final pitch to voters as well. In an ideal world, this would be a lot closer to what we thought was an April 12 election, but might be 2 months away, but I think the message is still relevant. Reverse alphabetical order by surname. Jim Willmott, your closing statement.
Australians are struggling under a cost of living crisis, and the real cause, like I said before, is the cost of government. Higher taxes, red tape and reckless policies have driven up the price of everything. Housing, energy, milk, bread, eggs, everyday essentials, and it doesn't have to be this way. We need affordable, reliable energy to power our industry, create jobs and bring down costs for every household. We must protect our property rights and cut bureaucratic barriers, which there are many, so more Australians can own a home. A small, efficient government means lower taxes, less waste, and a system that works for you, not against you. And when it comes to immigration, we need a plan that strengthens the nation, not strains it. Most importantly, we must fight to keep Australia a free country, a country where your rights aren't up for negotiation, where the government serves the people, not controls them. Libertarians believe in real solutions, not empty promises. It's time to cut costs, lower taxes, and put the power back where it belongs, with you. Vote Libertarian and vote for real change. Thank you.
Jim Willmott, thank you. Senator Malcolm Roberts, your closing statement.
Thank you, Leo, and 6 News for having me tonight. And thanks to Belinda, Gerard, and Jim. I'm sure viewers have a better understanding of our parties. I would hope that Belinda's supporters understand that One Nation is offering voters a sensible middle ground between free grow and onerous regulation. The reality is free grow will never get through Parliament in the next term. Sensible down regulation can, and that's what I will pursue as the next step. Gerard and Jim have great ideas on reducing the size of government, and so does One Nation. I've talked about our detailed plan to shrink the government to fit the Constitution, and there's much more online. We won't shrink the government as much as the Libertarians. One Nation values a social security safety net that helps those who can't help themselves, a government that uses its power for good, not evil. We will not leave Australians at the mercy of rapacious corporations. With your vote, One Nation will grow Australia's productive capacity to create wealth and abundance for all.
Thank you very much, Senator Gerard Rennick.
Yeah, thanks, Leo, and thanks for everyone listening tonight, and for the other senators for coming on, or other Senate candidates for coming on. Look, ultimately, People First believe that we want to make sure that our children get the same opportunities as our forefathers gave to us. We want to make sure that Australians, we stand up for Australians who try to stand up for themselves. We believe the role of government is to serve the people and not control them. And we also believe that we have the solutions, not just issues around COVID and climate change, but real economic solutions that are going to put more money into people's pockets. And finally, we have always fought, I've paid the price for taking a stand throughout COVID with those vaccine mandates, because we put the people first. I put the people first. And that cost me with the party. So you know that I will take a fall, and I'm not afraid to go in there and put the people first and fight for you against the establishment, whether it's big government, big media, big corporations, big super funds or big unions. Thanks, Leo.
Thank you very much. Belinda Jones, your closing statement.
Thank you very much, Leo, and thank you to the other panel members for debating tonight and viewers. Legalise Cannabis is really committed to getting cannabis legalised in the next Parliament and working collaboratively across the House of Representatives and the Senate to achieve our goals. Now, as it has been mentioned, they do come cannabis comes under state law, but we do need to look at the Federal Crimes Acts and other associated legislation in order to pave the way for states to legalise cannabis. We also want to look at the Fair Work legislation, and under our belief in bodily autonomy and personal freedoms, we want to make sure that our first responders, ADF, and every other employee in this country is never sacked for using cannabis, because we believe that cannabis has so many health benefits that the first responders particularly. I'm a SES member and I work closely with a lot of first responders, and I've seen what they have to deal with, and they need to go home at the end of their day, have a good restful sleep and wake up refreshed the next morning. So we've got an agenda, but any bill that we are asked to vote on, if we are fortunate to win a Senate seat, our position will fall within the parameters of our values. And our values are personal freedoms, bodily autonomy, non-violence, tolerance, peace, civil liberties, and social justice. We are a party of solutions. We are solution-focused, and we don't engage in the political narratives which seek to divide and upset our democracy. We are a grassroots party, literally, and we believe that many of the other minor parties have had a fair go, and there's change isn't coming quick enough. So we are asking Queenslanders to vote one, legalise cannabis, and let's give somebody else a go and see if we can get the job done. We believe we can, and I believe I will make a very good senator and represent Queenslanders' interests very well.
Thank you very much, and that is where we will leave our historic first Senate debate of the federal election season. If you'd like to give your thoughts on who you thought maybe won this debate, there is a poll in the live chat if you're watching us on YouTube. But of course, you can give your thoughts anytime in the comment section. Use the hashtag 6NewsAU. And make sure you share this as well. Clip it up, post it wherever, because this is a key moment between four really key candidates. I want to thank them all for being here tonight. Tomorrow night on 6 News, we have another debate, 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, the Victorian Senate debate featuring Libertarian Party candidate Jordan Ditloff, Legalise Cannabis's Fiona Patton, One Nation's Warren Pickering, and the Victorian Socialist Jordan Van Den Lem, aka Purple Pingers. That's 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, so for our Queensland viewers, that's 6 p.m. your time. Of course, streaming anytime you want right here on 6 News. We really look forward to that. We've got South Australia next week, and we're hoping to do New South Wales, Tasmania, and Western Australia very, very soon. Thank you so much to the Legalise Cannabis parties, Belinda Jones, the Libertarian parties, Jim Willmott, the One Nation parties, Senator Malcolm Roberts, and the People First parties, Senator Gerard Rennick, for being here tonight. This is a huge moment for 6 News. We want to thank them all sincerely for appearing in this debate, and I'm sure we'll have them on again in the future. I'm Leonardo Puglisi in 6 News Election Headquarters. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great night.
This has been a special presentation from 6 News Australia.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good evening and welcome to 6 News.